Hey everyone, so this is Vikings season 5, episodes 1 and 2, The Departed. I just want to try to go through this quickly, but, so, it starts off with everyone giving Sigurd a funeral, and then Ivar tells his brothers that he didn't mean to kill Sigurd. He only did it because Sigurd always taunted him, and, um, and, um, and all that, and anger came over him, and he wasn't thinking. When Ivor leaves, Uber doesn't want him to be in charge of the Great Army. Bjorn tells him, well, since it's not my concern, I'm going to let you deal with it, because I'm going to the Mediterranean, I'm gonna leave y'all asses behind, and all that. So, and he's going to the Mediterranean with Halfdan, King Harold's brother. King Harold tells Bjorn that he will tell Lagertha of everything that happened. Then it goes to Wessex, where Bishop Hammond leads a search party for Egbert's body. They find it. I'm jumping a little ahead of here. They decide to give him a funeral. I think I'm jumping ahead here a little bit. But anyway, so it goes back to I don't remember where they are, but it goes back to wherever the brothers and Harold and Halfdan are. So Harold goes up to Halfdan and is like wondering why is he wanting to split from him. Halfdan's like, well, dude, I don't want to be king of all Norway. That was your idea. I never wanted to. I never wanted to be that. I just want to see the world. So Harold feels like he's okay with it, but when Halfdan, leaves, he's like, okay, I ain't too happy about that shit. Anyway, so Ivar then goes to see Floki and finds out Floki is making a one-man ship to go wherever the gods decide that they will let him go. Ivar wants Floki to come with them because he feels his brothers don't believe him about not meaning to kill Sigurd. I kind of half believe him. I mean, or I guess I believe him. I mean, because I can see why he would be overcome by anger. I can see why. Because, I can see why he would. Because at some point, you're gonna get sick of people making fun of you because of whatever issues you have. Like, whether it's, like, you have a speech impediment, or you have a noticeable limp or whatever. If you can't even walk like Ivar, like, you're eventually gonna get sick of that shit. So Floki is like, well, I don't belong here anymore, so I have to go. Ivar is upset because he feels like his heart is broken, and Floki reassures him that it will heal and all that. And then eventually Floki does leave. And when he does leave, everyone, is saying goodbye, like, basically in their own way saying goodbye to him. Bjorn and his army then set off for the Mediterranean, and we don't see them at all for the rest of the episode, or 2 episodes. We don't see them at all anymore throughout the rest of this first part of the episode, or first episode, and we don't see them at all in the second episode. I mean, that's not to say we won't see them later, but we don't see them at all for the rest of this entire thing. So when gives the eulogy for the funeral and all that, a man comes up and I think he's supposed to be like a friar or something like that, or something. He's dressed up like one because I don't know what he's supposed to be, but he's dressed up in like clothing one would see of a person in the church or something. I don't know. Anyway, so he comes up. Haman's like, why were you spared? He doesn't know, and the man reveals that Egbert gave part of his land to the Vikings, but it wasn't legitimate because he renounced his crown to his son before the Vikings ever came. So, that's all revealed. We then go to where Aethelwulf, his men, and his wife and son are, and we find out Alfred is very sick. With what, we don't know, or at least they don't know, so we don't know. And he's wondering if Alfred is dying, and when he and his wife do this outside, he's like, well, I think God sent the Vikings to punish us for our sins, along with killing Alfred. Like killing Alfred is part of repenting for our sins and shit. And Judith's like, well, why the fuck would you say that? I don't want to hear that. So Haman prays for Egbert while people are watching him. And I'm just sitting here, this entire, like, up until this point, I'm thinking to myself this entire time, why the fuck is Jonathan Rhys-Meyers talking like that? I don't get it. Why is he talking like that? His normal speaking voice sounds very beautiful to me. It does. And I'm just like, why the fuck? I get that, and I get that this is a character that he's trying to portray, but why is he talking like that? It's irking the hell out of me. It's really irking the hell out of me. And in the second episode, he didn't seem to be talking like that, like he was during this scene. But for some reason, for like at least a quarter of the like first episode, he was talking like naturally his voice sounds is supposed to be gravelly. It is not, and it's like his voice is everything else that I've seen him play a part in. His voice sounds like butter, basically. It just sounds like velvet or something. It sounds smooth, and it's just like it was bothering the hell out of me. I was just like, what the fuck is going on? I don't get it. Like, it was really bothering me. I had to get that because it was bugging me. It was bugging the hell out of me, and I was just like, I couldn't like continue with the episode and not have wrote that down as wondering why. Like, I was okay, moving on. Uba is like, well, we should go back to England, divide the land out that was given to them. Ivra's like, well, we should go back to where we defeated Ayla, keep the fleet on the coast, and continue raiding from there, and have a stronghold in a city. And Uba's not for that because he's like, well, father didn't want to just be a raider, so we shouldn't be either. And Ivor's like, well, I know of a city where we can situate ourselves, and it's called York, and all of that. And there's a river that we can get to it from the coast or whatever. So Zvitserk agrees with Ivar, and Uba fiends like he's okay with it, but clearly wasn't. Floki then finds the sundial rock that Ivar left for him in his sack, knapsack or whatever you want to call it, but he throws it in the ocean. Haman is summoned to the church by a woman named Aethelgith, I think that's what she said her name was. Is this the same woman that we saw in the season finale or in last season where Haman was having sex? Like, is this the same woman he was having sex with last season, basically? Because I remember him having sex with some woman, even though he's supposed to be a man of God, like literally working for God, and I mean, is this the same woman or am I thinking of another person entirely? Because I don't know. Maybe you can help me with that, because I don't remember. I didn't go back and look at it, like look at the last few episodes of season 4, so I don't remember. Um, and he's giving like a little prayer or whatever in Latin and English and all that, and old in English or whatever. Anyway, so Hammond is then, suddenly seen walking through leafless thorn branches or whatever you want to call them, and he's all bloody and stuff, and he's like asking God to forgive his sins and whatever. I don't know. Wasn't that into it. Anyway, so in New York, Ivor thinks they should attack the next day before the people there find out they're there. But Uba's like, well, we should do it on the Saint Day, because that is when most people will be either in church or drunk. So they then kidnap 2 boys who are fishing nearby. And Ivor asks them in their own language when the next Saint Day is, and he finds out that it's in 3 days. 3 days later, they attack, and they get to the church, go inside, start killing people. Uba then doesn't seem to really be all that into killing people. He and I don't think I actually saw him kill. Well, maybe I think. Well, I think we saw him kill like 1 or 2 people on his way inside the city, but inside the church itself, we don't see him kill anybody, as far as I remember. Ivar then pours what I think is like boiling glowing metal or whatever in this bishop's mouth. Thought he was a priest at first, but apparently he was a bishop. And then afterward, after all the killing is done, Uba still seems very enthused. So then it goes to Kattegat, where Torvi is fighting with her now much older son from her first marriage. And they hear horns, go to see who it is, and then after realizing that it's Harold, warns Lagatha. Once Harold comes in to the main hall, he tells Lagatha about Bjorn getting revenge on Egbert and Ayla, that Bjorn went to the Mediterranean, went straight back to the Mediterranean after getting revenge, basically, and that Ivar killed Sigurd, and that's the reason why he came back, was because Bjorn didn't want to come back and tell her everything that was going on. So she tells him that she knows about the strategy with Eagle, and he doesn't deny it. Eventually he says he's like, I'm happy to die, and asks for Asher to strike him with the sword and all that. So it goes back to Floki. I think I might get Floki's storyline out of the way, since that was very short amount of scenes. So Floki is still sailing, but managed to get at a standstill due to no wind, so he starts to row. Later we see him. Let's see, when's the next time we see him? What was he doing? Okay, so we see him next after that, having run out of water. He says he doesn't want to die like this. Calls the Heimdall, the watchman. He releases the crow, hoping it doesn't come back. Let's see. He ends up encountering a storm, and he, I guess you could say, meditates while it's happening in the boat, and then later wakes up after the storm is over, and his boat is stranded on the beach somewhere. Somewhere where we don't know. I have no idea where it is, because I didn't say. He crawls a few spaces, drinks some water out of an indented rock, then, makes his way to a cave where he builds himself a fire, and after he warms up, he explores the land, climbing up a rock cliff, and when he reaches the top, he looks around while thanking the Allfather for showing it to him. He keeps walking around and reaches a waterfall, and when he sees it, I saw that the water was flowing backwards, like back up the waterfall instead of down. At first, I don't know if anybody else saw that, and then he sees this figured man of water come out of it, and he believes he's now in Asgard. Okay, so that's basically Floki's whole story, rest of the storyline. I wanted to get that out of the way since that was pretty short. As Haemon, after we saw, Loki at a standstill, Haemon cuts open a deer when he hears, and then he gets told by one of his men that that the Vikings are in York and have killed the bishop there. Then goes back to Kattegat where Agatha has bound Harold, and she's like, well, what do you want now? Like, what do you want, and all that, and he reveals the reason why he ever did any of this was because he was in love with a woman who told him that he needed to become king of all Norway before she would marry him. And when he ran into her last season, excuse me, he found out that she lied to him, and that she married a duke from a Danish duke, I think that's what he said. And so he's like, well, you and Kattegat are vulnerable because of Aslog's sons still wanting to revenge her death. So he offers to marry her for her own protection, but she doesn't take it, feeling as if it's a trap. So she decides to have sex with him there anyway, because he was like, well, I can be your husband for your protection and all that. And she's like, well, why would I invite you into my bed? So she just has sex with him. Uwe and Switzer try to talk with Ivar, but try to go to talk to Ivar, but are blocked by his bodyguards. They are let through only when Uwe threatens one of the main one. Once through, Ube's like, why the fuck do you have bodyguards? He's like, what? I'm a cripple. I need fucking bodyguards. And Ube has this major problem that Ivar doesn't tell himself or Svitserk about any plans that or anything that he does, because they're all heads of the army, not just him. Ivar is, like, well, I have to strive so much harder to his claim because, like, he has to make them forget he's a cripple, and then Uba tells him about the Saxon army coming their way. Lagatha is then seen explaining what she talked to Harold about to Torvi, Astrid, and Margaret. Astrid doesn't like the fact that, doesn't like this or whatever, and so she gets all huffy and leaves. And then as she leaves, she gets kidnapped by some of Harold's men, and taken to a boat where Harold eventually goes onto himself. And basically, when they hear the horns being called out, that's when Lagatha realizes that Astrid is missing, and that Harold most likely has her. So, on the boat, a little later, Harold unties Astrid, tells her that she will be useful because he still has ambitions to rule all of Norway, but he needs a queen to by his side to have his kids. Astrid's like, well, I won't do that because Lagatha has been good to me. Harold asks her, well, if the thought of, being the most powerful woman in all of Norway makes her blood race, like, makes her excited, and then leaves. We then see him and some of his men stake out York, and he thinks it's a shame Aethelwulf isn't there to help encourage the new recruits. Then goes to where Aethelwulf and his family are, and Judith is like, well, I want to talk about Alfred, but Aethelwulf's not for it because he's tired of talking about him. And let's see. When Aethelwulf goes to check on Alfred, he finds Alfred walking into the water, hallucinating. And is it just me, or did, at this point when Alfred is walking in the water, didn't he look like the seer at that moment? Because it kind of looked like the seer, except with eyes. I don't know. So anyway, Alfred is, reaching out for whatever he's hallucinating about, then falls face first in the water. Aethelwulf runs to rescue him and brings him back onto land. And when I completely forgot that they didn't have CPR back then. And I was like, why the fuck aren't they doing anything? Then for like a second, I thought that, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot they didn't have CPR back then. I was like, I had a huge brain fart at that point. I was like, why the fuck aren't they doing anything? I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, so Alfred then eventually cops off the water. He says that they must go to York because the Vikings are there, and he knows it's because Athelstan told him. Aethelwulf and his family eventually go to York. Leo then goes back to Lagertha, knowing that Harold lied about being done with wanting to be king of all of Norway. But she doesn't figure how Astrid fits into his plans as of yet. Harold then goes back up to Astrid, asking if she gave any thought to what he asked, and she just flat out says, "I'm not, going to marry you." Aethelwulf meets with Haemond and introduces his wife to him. Haemond's like, well, why are you with Aethelwulf, Judith? And she's like, well, I have a score to settle as daughter to Aela. Eventually talk about a way to defeat, or a way to attack the Vikings. And he brings up the fact that they didn't repair the walls. I think he said the Roman walls that were destroyed. And it seems like the walls are unguarded and unprotected, and so he would like to attack them after a few days, after a little while has gone about, to see if it remains unguarded. So it then goes back to Kattegat, where Margaret comes up to Torvi and tells her of her concerns about Lagertha having made a mistake, and that her grip on her power isn't as fierce as it once was, and thinks that, Torvi is dead, even though they don't know that. So the last thing we see in the second half of the second episode is Ivar showing his brothers his iron crutches, and that he can now walk in them. So, I saw the promo for the upcoming season. They didn't necessarily focus on tomorrow night's episode, but they looked at they showed different parts of the upcoming season, and they showed Ivar wanting to be the rightful and sole leader of the great army, and Lagertha proposes that she will help Ubba not let that happen if he will help her defend herself and Kattegat from Harold. That's basically what it was mainly about. I mean, you saw a little bit about what I assume to be coming up in tomorrow night's episode, but I mean, I didn't really I'm not gonna touch on it. So I have one prediction for, I guess, the long term, not really the short term. Well, I guess you could say it's both short term and long term. I personally think that Asher will change her mind about marrying Harold and will marry him as a result of what Lagatha says or does. Whether that's Harold telling her a lie, saying that Lagatha said something negative and disparaging about Asher herself, or whether it's true, whether it's true, or whether Asher actually overhears Lagatha say something negative and disparaging about her, or sees Lagatha doing something that Asher doesn't like. I don't know, but I personally think she will change her mind as a result of like I said, what Lagatha says or does, or possibly even both of those things. So that's my one and only prediction so far. And I will be back tomorrow for hopefully for Chicago Med.